Hi everyone, Fresh here, and I'm back here with a returning guest on the channel. This will be trial number 2 with the one and only SchizoSaint. How are you doing, man?
I am doing fantastic.
Hey man, last time we talked, and maybe even in the interim, unfortunately some of that has become really lost footage because I can't find it. We were talking about the dark arts, but before we were talking uh, cryptids and a couple of bits and pieces of equipment and philosophy. And I wanted to revisit the latter part with you just a little bit. You do have a bit of a wish list for a build that you would like to do, and you had a lot of good reasoning for some of the parts that you wanted to choose. What is this special little shorty project that you were thinking of doing or wished to gather a little bit of information on?
Yeah, so I'll keep it brief. So I have a daydream every day about a 300 blackout AR build. And the primary appeal to me of 300 blackout, I could care less about its subsonic capabilities right now. The applications in which you would want to use a subsonic 300 blackout, there are situations in which I don't want to get too Fed posty, but you'd probably only pop off one or two rounds before you'd need to switch to supersonics anyway. And so what that means is that you don't even need to stockpile that much supersonic ammo if you're a prepper like me or whatever. So supersonic ammo is where the real interest for me is with 300 blackout, because supersonic 300 blackout ammo, as I'm sure a lot of you know, is comparable to 7.62 by 39. And what that means is that we can have a much shorter AR-15. We can start looking at 5-inch, 7-inch barreled AR-15s. And what that means is that you can have a lighter, more portable AR. You can have a truly backpackable AR-15, something that's incredibly portable. You can fit it in most standard size bags. Like, that whole idea is just so cool to me, because you'd have something that's extremely effective for self-defense against people, something effective for self-defense against, creatures, animals or whatever. And you have something that you can fit in just a stupid laptop bag. That idea is it's so cool to me. And I have a lot of ideas what the parts would be, but yeah, that's the whole philosophy behind it.
And for your FUDs out there, it is a hunting safe cartridge. There are great bullet designs and constructions out there that'll help you take your deer. Bambi's going to be okay. You can put an ethical kill on Bambi, out to 200 yards out of a, reasonably short AR-15 package. Now, Schizo, can you detail some of the parts that you were thinking about this build in particular? I've seen some discussions on the forums around here for what you were looking for, and you did have some careful reasoning there. What would you like to do, or at least so far, what are you thinking about in terms of bringing this build together? Maybe even piece by piece, if you would like.
Yeah, so I'll get the basic parts out of the way. So for the stock, I'd have an SBA3 brace. I would magically, completely separate from that, I'd join the Firearms Policy Coalition a day before I do that. But I'd probably just have an SBA3 for completely unrelated reasons. I'd probably have an SBA3 brace on there. Grip would be the K2 grip, love it to death. The trigger would be a Schmidt trigger. Unless you're trying to do some crazy thing, I don't think anyone needs anything other than a Schmidt trigger. Bullet carrier group would probably just be some boring Carpenter 158 crap. The receiver set's probably going to be Arrow, because we can get more into that later. But I really struggle to understand why someone would want anything other than a Arrow precision receiver set, but we'll talk more about that later. But the interesting part with the under blackout, obviously, is the barrel length. So I've honestly been thinking, like, if the whole point of this is to have as short of an AR-15 as possible that is still lethal, why not just go all the way to 5 inches? There are a few companies out there that make 5-inch 300 blackout barrels, and I don't know if it's just because they're using less material or whatever, but those barrels are also really affordable, so that's also a big appeal for me. I was also looking at Noveski's, I think it's their 7 or 8-inch barrel. That would be an incredibly high quality barrel. I mean, that would be really, really cool. But no longer than 8 inches, in my opinion, just because, again, with 300 blackout, like, if you wanted a Mark 18 size gun, just get a Mark 18. But you want to take advantage of the fact that you can have a smaller AR. So, yeah, really thinking 7, 8 inches, but maybe even 5 if I'm if it makes enough people laugh, because that is pretty ridiculous. But yeah.
Gotcha. Did you have a particular subsonic and supersonic load in mind for that 5-inch barrel when you were kind of thinking about what kind of barrel length you were looking for?
Yeah, so supersonic, 125 grain. It's made by AAC, not the original AAC, but Palmetto's AAC. They make a 125 grain VMAX bullet that is just beautiful. I mean, that would be spectacular. Like I said, I'm not really even thinking about subs right now, because even if I did have the money for a suppressor, like, I'm sure suppressors are awesome. I don't doubt that. I just don't know if it's worth selling my soul that much more to the federal government for it. But maybe. I'm not, counting it out yet. But right now, this is a supersonic exclusive build. That also means I don't have to worry about an adjustable gas block. I know those can be kind of finicky. I'd rather just have, just a really heavy buffer and not worry about it. So.
Yeah, true. If you're going 5-inch, that's going to be pistol length pretty much at the maximum. And maybe with an adjustable gas block, you could do subs and supers, but I found on multiple barrels, I used to have a 16-inch that was they used to be pistol length, and it did cycle both pretty reliably. If you did go subsonic, I've tried these before. The Controlled Chaos, I believe 190 or 194 grain from Lehigh Defense. I, as far as I know, in terms of common commercial loadings, that will expand pretty reliably at subsonic velocities. Maybe for hunting, even for self-defense. I know there's a bunch of other companies with monolithic bullets coming out that might perform that way, but just again, remains to be seen. There's been an uptick in that, and then a lull on the internet over time, and I don't know if that was to do with the plague and whatnot, but I thought it was very, very interesting there. Yeah, but your choice of barrel manufacturer for a particular package, is there anything really behind that that you were thinking, or was it just kind of a name brand choice and something a little bit deeper? What were you thinking there?
Yeah, so as far as those 5-inch barrels I was talking about, I'll have to send you the company later. It's some company I've never heard of before. Not to say they're bad, they don't have a reputation, right? I would also consider Ballistic Advantage. From recent research I found online, there's a lot of people saying that modern button rifle barrels are just as good as Cold Hammer forged in terms of barrel life and durability, which is pretty crazy if that's true. So I actually wouldn't even mind just going with a Ballistic Advantage or even an Aero Precision barrel. The reason why I want a Noveske is just so I can say I have a Noveske. I mean, it's the Lululemon for men. You know what I mean? There's not really a functional reason behind it. It would just be fun to, say, hey, I have a Noveske barrel. Just because Noveske has that history, AR nerds love them. So yeah, it would just be kind of cool. I wouldn't mind at all having a Ballistic Advantage.
So I suppose that Noveske choice is really just a shout out to Jim's Goon Life or some other channel where they want some more boutique stuff. Unless I'm opening. Yeah. Yeah.
Also, John Noveske is one of my favorite victims of our government. So it'd be kind of cool to own one of those. So
indeed. All right, so you've got uppers. You got a particular upper, which setup we'll get into that in a bit. You got a grip. You got a stock. You have the system for cycling. So we have some of the physics considered here. Did you have any cans in mind? Once let's say you were to fill out your form, do a tax stamp. Were there any cans in particular that you were looking at for this interesting 5-inch package that you'd be going, or have you ever done any research on it so far that led you to something in the future for suppression?
Absolutely, yeah. So suppressors are kind of funny because, I don't know, there's so many of them. There's a shocking amount of suppressors for how hard they are to get, which I think is actually a good sign. That means more people are getting suppressors. Maybe that'll change some legislation in the future. Maybe I shouldn't get my hopes up. Anyway, as far as cans, I'm a really big Aero Precision fan. I've noticed a movement in sort of the online gun AR community trying to make arrow look bad. I don't get that. They make really good stuff. From what I've seen, the Lahar series looks really good. Q stuff looks good as well, but it's like it's kind of expensive, and I don't think there's any technological advantage to a Q can over, say, an arrow can. Like, they seem sort of in that same kind of genre of suppressors, as far as I can tell. Obviously, the dream is a Huxworks can, but, you know, that's up there with, like, having a Radian, right? That's like a life goal kind of thing. That's probably not a near future thing. So I'd probably just get a Lahar, you know. It's kind of vanilla, but they look really good. I've heard they're superior to YHMs, so that's the only reason I'd get a Lahar over a YHM. But
I'm thinking a 300 blackout. You probably don't need necessarily a super high end can. I mean, you don't have extremely hot gases coming out of that barrel by that time, even for a 300 blackout. I mean, the pressure drop down that barrel is quite significant with a straight wall cartridge, you know, relatively straight wall cartridge of that sort. So I would think even that platform ballistically, in terms of longevity, might work fairly well. Unless I'm wrong, unless there's some other data. But having a super short 5.56 or something like a 6.8 SPC with some kind of low quality can, I could see that deteriorating it over time. But I think just with 300 blackout, with how easy it is on barrels, has to be pretty easy on cans. You know, barrel life is something that, you know, like our PRS, FUD, or 300 Magnum coating guys are always thinking about. And I think a can is no different. At that point, it's almost like an extension of the barrel, like an expansion chamber. So, yeah, probably going with the Lahar, even if it is kind of budget-minded. I think that will go a long way if you stick to that platform. Most likely 7.62 can. That's kind of what you were looking at, or something bigger to accessorize with others, or
the Dead Air Primal also looks really cool. I might get one of those just because I like the marketing. I think it's fun, and like it's a can I really could use on anything. So that would also be good.
Now, you were talking about your choices of uppers. You were going to explain at some point what were your actually, let's go with that trigger really quick. It was the Schmidt trigger. I don't think I've even actually heard of those in particular.
Yeah, so you probably have. So Schmidt is the OEM manufacturer for, like, I think it's PSA's enhanced trigger. Like, if you're ever on BCM's website, or I think even Sons of Liberty, PSA, Arrow, if you ever see like a nickel boron trigger, it's a Schmidt trigger. And all it is just a slightly better mil-spec trigger, which is just the way I like it. Light triggers kind of freak me out. I've had some weird incidences with those in the past.
Uh-oh.
And yeah. So yeah, Schmidt triggers are great though. So
gotcha. So you got an upper. Any handguard in particular, or would you kind of go with the stock Arrow? What are you thinking?
Arrow's handguard would be great, but the biggest problem is, you know, the YouTube guys, they just, you know, I wouldn't get YouTube clicks with an Arrow handguard. Just kidding. But an Arrow handguard would work just fine. Shorter Geisley handguards are pretty affordable as well, relatively, for a Geisley handguard. Midwest Industries makes a great little 4-inch or 5-inch AR handguard that would work great on a short barrel. So, yeah, nothing too exciting there. Well, maybe I'd get a quad rail just to help with the heat dissipation and for the memes. So, I don't know. We'd have to see. I'm not decided on that yet.
Well, I'm still gonna grill you on it just a little bit. So let's suppose you got yourself like I think that's a Mark 14. That's I think the like laser stiff handguard, I suppose. What kind of because this is a shorty. I think you're going to tailor this slightly towards a night vision setup, and I'm sure you're going to know where I'm leading into this here. If you were to run some kind of Lammer light on a setup like this backpack gun, what do you think would work best to keep this thing nice and handy?
Well, I'm never going to buy a GBRS Hydra mount because I'm a straight man. But if I ever had to, I would just buy the frickin' Airsoft one. I would not pay full price for one of those. Holy crap!
Like I'm not going to bleep the Somo gear. You replace a letter in there.
Yeah, literally. No, literally. Like, Honestly, if I could get away with the CTF, I think it's the CTF two.
Oh, sure.
Those look great. I don't. Yeah, honestly, that would probably be best. If I was running a 7-inch handguard, that would absolutely be my first choice. But on a 5-inch, I know it gets like just really crammed. So, yeah, I might have to run a Hydra mount, but again, it wouldn't because I want to. It would just because that's the only comfortable way to do it. So, yeah.
Yeah, no. If you go with any of the Phantom Hills, you probably don't need any switches because the handguard's so short. You just kind of wrap your hand around. Pretty sure you got big mitts there, so you would have no problem
Absolutely.
there. And that leads us a little bit to what kind of optic would you have in a short 300 blackout? What are you thinking on this guy?
Yeah, so this I've got two in mind, and we'll obviously talk more about the Unity mount that came out a little later.
Yes, sir.
I'd probably have the Unity mount again. This isn't like there's no practical reason behind it, but that way you can say I have a Unity mount. I'd probably have a Unity mounted primary arms prism. It would either be the 3X by itself or it'd be the 1X with a magnifier in the back. Honestly, it's probably just going to be the 3X by itself. I'm a big lover of weight savings, right? Like I want as much spare weight as possible to dedicate to, chips and water and food and all that crap in my backpack. So anyway, I would want as lightweight an optic setup as possible. So it would probably just be a Unity mounted primary arms 3X prism optic. I know that's kind of weird for such a short 300 blackout. Usually you're seeing red dots on those. And I think that's a fine choice. I'm just so paranoid about durability and EMPs and all that crap. And so that would be a very good all-around optic. It's going to cover all my bases. I think it even comes in a 300 blackout reticle. So that would be perfect for me.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. And the 3X is kind of an interesting choice there, too. It's not even just because the range of the blackout itself. You can tailor just about any reticle to any cartridge if you wanted, if you have Stray Lock or what was that, Chair Pro. There's another copy of it that's floating around in the Play stores. But, Chair Gun Elite, that's what it's called. Free plug there, Chair Gun Elite, please sponsor me. But it's... even if you had the reticle tailored, the 3X you could potentially work with night vision, and we'll probably talk about that in a minute. To some extent, if you have the right IR illuminator, you can make a 3X work in close quarters, and of course that'll be explained in another video. But yeah, if you want to keep this thing light and you don't want to deal with another magnifier in the back, I'm sure that would work out pretty well. Let's talk about that Unity mount for a sec here. So this thing came out. I had to do a little bit of thinking when it came to this mount too, because I had been considering one for a little bit. For night vision, I'm still kind of new to it, but at 2.26 height, do you have any experience with using mounts that high yourself in?
So the closest thing I've had to it is I have the red dot mounted super high up on my Vortex Prism. I think it's literally, you had the exact same setup as me, right? Isn't it like 4 inches? Like it's like, how tall is it?
Yeah. Just about 4.
It's crazy. So I don't understand the math behind this, right? Like I only have an associate's degree, right? Like I don't get it. But for whatever reason, super high mounted optics, it is so much easier for me to shoot at long range with them. Like I barely have to hold at all. I don't know why, but I feel like whether the target's at 50 yards or 200 yards or 500 yards, I feel like I barely have to hold at all with the red dot. And I don't know why that is, but it makes shooting at long range with a 1X optic very easy for some reason. I've heard other people had that experience as well. But the problem with it though is that if you're prone, you have to put your head way up. And that freaks me out, man. Because if you watch a lot of this footage in Ukraine, you have a lot of guys, they just run and then they dive and then they run and then they dive. Like they just get as low as they can. And I don't know if I want my optic forcing me to stick my head way up. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of odd to me.
That's such a good point. Tactically, that's definitely less than ideal if you are prone. So you almost need to camp the rifle 90 degrees while you're on the ground, and you need a chin weld at the same time, which I can't really imagine doing at the moment. So that 2.26 is interesting. My best guess, me not doing a terrible amount of research here, because I looked at 2.26, I look at my Piggyback Vortex 5X, look, recoil control, a little bit difficult, but again, the same observation that you've made. Out to 300 yards, it feels slightly more accurate than a magnified optic. I guess maybe we'll just cite a couple of reasons as to why that's the case here.
Please.
One would probably be, hey, you were talking about your vortex, potentially the erector assembly. If that was an issue, yeah, potentially if you have bad erector assembly, you're gonna have a lot more variation in shooting, certain possibility. Two, we're a lot twitchier with magnified optics. If you, for any engineers out there, your hand-eye coordination when it comes behind a scope is kind of like let's call it a PID loop or PI controller, where you're taking inputs from your eyes and then you're moving the rifle in response to it or to twitching, and your body's kind of doing this instinctual thing. If you have a 5X prism, which is a lot of magnification for a fixed optic, and you're moving around and you're not in the most stable position, your hands are a bit twitchy. Let's say some of us are, not as steady with our hands behind a rifle as others. You're going to move that thing a lot. You're going to be a little bit less confident in your trigger pull when you are going at 100 yards. And sometimes at that red dot, you're not seeing that particular effect. So I've seen this exact same thing. I verified my 0 and my 5X. I just found that with this red dot, I'm not caring as much about twitching. I just point at the target and shoot, and it doesn't move. And for some reason behind the 5X, the rifle is just moving more. So this is my advocacy for having no more magnification than you need to shoot, and no more magnification than you need for PID at distance. Essentially, that's probably me. Getting to a habit of just having a little bit less magnification than you think you need at the beginning, I think promotes a little bit of shooting maturity, and it just makes us all better, right? But that 5X I think is excellent. It's still a step in the right direction compared to some people trying to put like a fixed 10X SWFA on their 16-inch or 14-inch AR. I'm one of those guys. That was one of my first scopes, and I still love the thing. I'm going to do a review on that one, I think, pretty soon. It has
a fixed 10X.
There's
Wait,
a fixed.
What? Hold on.
Yeah. SWFA makes a super sniper. It probably still does. They don't stay on the shelves for very long. But if you go on SWFA's website or on Primary Arms, they have the SS10X. That is yours makes no difference, a first focal plane scope. That used to be a military contract for the Navy, I believe. This was a sniper scope issued back then under TASCO, I think. And it was...
Really?
Yeah, it had good turrets on it, great clicks, excellent parallax adjustment. It was extremely durable, very lightweight. This is actually lighter than some prisms, even with a mount, surprisingly. So if you're planning to just do a DMR kind of rig, I've been a fan of that thing. That thing's been sat on my 308 a few times, and it just works. And because it's so light, it takes recoil like it's nobody's business. So feel free to take a look at that thing and see what you think. I think it's like $300 too, so it's not really
it's
expensive.
Cheap. This thing's hilarious. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, and it's quite durable. It's still based off the original Navy contract, I believe. And I'd have to look up. There's an episode I think from Deborosaurus Rex or something. Well, that's where I heard about this thing. I was like, I'll buy it. This was my fuddy days 5-6 years ago when I was playing with scopes. But anyway, where I'm trying to go with that is, sometimes that's one of the things. Maybe one person may have too much magnification for the application or day. I guess where was I going with that? I guess that was maybe a third reason for where that height might be coming from is maybe that chin weld is forcing us to try and find a more precise position than what we're normally doing. I don't know if that logic really catches on that last one. This is too much ranting.
No, yeah.
But,
no, you're good.
Yeah,
no, that makes perfect sense. Well, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and so where this is leading me to is like, what do you think is the reason that that Unity mount is only at 2.26? Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
No, I'm not thinking what you're thinking. What are you thinking?
I'm not sure sometimes. What stinks, because I really like the Unity mounts and I like that flip to center magnifier. It's a beautiful system. And I was like thinking, it's like, why can't they make that thing lower? Because I have this 1.93 mount here, knock-on aluminum from Primary Arms for their microprism lineup, and it's a nice height for NV. And I guess I get it that 2.26 is good for gas masks, but this 1.93 I think is like the best compromise hide over rail. I think the reason Unity is not doing 1.93s with that flip to side magnifier mount, which would be wonderful for that 1x prism that you were talking about. It's just that magnifiers just won't fit under. It won't be flipped to center anymore. Which I realized that the other day. I'm like, geometry, this is awful. It's like they need like a magnifier body that's like smaller. I don't know if that came to mind for you, but that's just, I love the system because it keeps the whole thing so compact, whether it's flipped up or down, and I don't know. That's kind of where my head's at with those Unity mounts. But
no, right. I mean, that's absolutely why they did it. Like, they want you to isn't that the whole point? Like, they want you to pair up the 1X with a magnifier in the back. I think I saw some of Primary Arms advertising today showing that. Let me find it. Yeah, it's crazy what they want to do, but yeah, no, it's Unity mounts are weird to me. Like, do you know why the Unity mount was made?
No idea, actually. Is there like a good origin story, or?
Well, it's kind of the same thing with like Scalar Works. Like, it's designed to fit a specific job, which is it is designed to be used with night vision, but it's even more specifically designed for like door kickers, right? So like these people in the GWAT that were doing like a hit a night or whatever. All of their shooting is done standing up, as far as I can tell, right? From like the GBRS videos or whatever. Like all of the stuff they do is standing up. And what's funny to me is so many American civilians then jump on this train of like, we need as high of red dots as possible. But it's like, the reality is like, you and I are probably not going to be kicking in doors. Maybe we will. I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. But more than likely, what's actually going to happen is we're going to be stuck in some godforsaken trench somewhere. Maybe we're in the hills. Like, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. But like, the American civilian, if they need an AR-15, needs an incredibly flexible platform, right? And so if you've just got, let's say you've got a really awesome, like Sons of Liberty Gunworks AR-15, you've got your Unity freaking 2 billion inch, whatever, stupid mount, and that's all you have with like a red dot, you're not as flexible as someone with like a worse rifle, but they have an LPVO or a prism. You know what I mean? It's kind of weird. Like, the door kicker job is a job in the U.S. military not held by a lot of people, but they're the ones that wanted that kind of mount. It's just American civilians like, oh, well, they have it, so that must mean it's good, so I should have it. Well, it's like, well, you two don't have the same job. You know what I mean? I don't know. Does that make sense? Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny you mentioned that with the mount. It's less flexible, because of height and whatnot. Yes, there's some durability that you get from it, but two, there's no prism underneath it. Yeah, there's a prism in the rear, but there's no prism underneath it, which makes me think, well, why would? Again, the logic might not be 100% sound, and I may be missing a few small reasons that end up still pushing us towards like this tall mount. But it's like, why don't you just get a prism and make that a platform for your red dot instead of just the mount, at this point. And again, this is my bias. This is also your bias, because we both love our piggyback setups. But it's like, why not also have that long range capability while just moving your head at that point? You could still have the night vision on the red dot on top. And probably some of that reasoning actually is is a problem that I'm working on and solving now. But it's like, hey, what if you could do a piggyback? Should I really give this away? Yeah. What if you could do a piggyback 8.T2 on a Vortex Prism, or a piggyback 1X Prism on top of a 5X Prism? Again, I'm working on some solutions there in the meantime, and I'll probably have you guys test it. But that could be why people are not going for prisms and piggybacking, to help with that flexibility aspect that you just mentioned. So I think there's a lot of market opportunity to kind of beat those companies at their own game for the civilian market, in a sense. And I love the companies and what they do, but there's opportunities to make the whole setup lighter, yet still have almost exact same NV capabilities and flexibility that for a civilian. It's almost like we tend to draw the larger straw when it comes to that innovation. So I cannot wait to hopefully break into that at some point. But and the choice for using the 1X Prism in this case was interesting, because if I have one of my boxes here for this, let's see, we have the mounting system here. I have the one for the 5X, for example. The straight spacer and cantilever high spacer do bring you to 2.075, 200 thousandths. I think that shouldn't bring you too far off with the magnifier. If you get the ADM, I think QD mount, that brings you up just a tiny bit higher than that for the mini ACOG. You still end up pretty close to 2.26 just with that existing solution. So other than not having to deal with a cantilever or super long screws, Unity is, again, exactly like you said, they're only addressing a very specific little situation that maybe makes the difference for some people. And again, we'd have to put pros and cons lists here, but I don't know if that kind of makes sense to you. Again, 2.075, and then you add 100 thousandths to it, and it tends to work there. So the Unity mounts are cool. It's just I wish magnifiers were small enough that they could do a 1.93. I think more and more people would go towards those Unity mounts if they could. So.
Yeah, well, flip to center makes, from someone who, I've used a magnifier before. It's not like the end of the world, but it is pretty annoying when it hangs off to the right and it throws off the weight of your rifle and, the whole thing. So, yeah, I think someone needs to make a tiny little magnifier so that I can have like a 1.5, micro prism or red dot, and then have that flip to center magnifier. That'd be a really clean setup, man. I don't even know if that's physically possible, but one can dream.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty great.
So, supposedly there might be a few types of designated targets for this 5-inch setup. You talked about personnel at some point too. However, there might be a couple of creatures that you may or may not have mentioned in this case. What creatures have you set your sights on, so to speak, that have been keeping you up at night in your research and your travels and your armed expeditions lately?
Yeah, primarily the No, I'm just kidding. I genuinely do think about that all the time. So obviously, that's my whole YouTube channel. But so obviously, everyone knows about Bigfoot. Would a 300 blackout, 5-inch 300 blackout, be effective against a charging 800-pound primate? I have no idea. That is something we will need more real-world data to look at. There's quite a few anecdotal reports from like the Old West about people shooting Sasquatch and its subspecies, and to varying degrees of success. Sometimes it just runs away, sometimes it dies, sometimes it doesn't stop it at all, and someone gets eaten, right? there's a story. Oh man, I'll have to look it up. So, yeah, okay. So there's a story about this Bigfoot that was shot. It was called the Minnesota Iceman. This hunter in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, or excuse me, died in Minnesota. He went in, he was hunting, and he ended up having to shoot a Sasquatch. He shot it, I think, with a 30-06, and that killed it. It's actually a really interesting story about how the body was taken by the Smithsonian. It's a good read. Anyway, so we know 30-06 can kill Sasquatch. We know 308 can probably kill Sasquatch because 308 is just smaller, 30-06, right? It's just slightly less powder, so that could probably do a pretty decent job.
Yeah.
And so the question is, 300 blackout is just 5.56 with the 30-06 bullet, right? It's like the same, I think, right? Isn't it the same bullet? Or am I crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 30 caliber projectile, right? It's going so much slower than a 308 and 30-06. I have no idea if it would actually be effective. Maybe what I should do, I should see what people do if they have to shoot gorillas and then just go based off that to figure out if 300 blackout would be a good Bigfoot gun. I have no idea, but I don't know. Like, well, let me ask you. So I know you're like a skeptic atheist, Neil deGrasse Tyson lover or whatever, but let's say you were going deep into the godforsaken mountains of, like, I don't know, Utah or something. If you figured you were going to be attacked by a Bigfoot, what gun would you take that you have right now? Would you take an AR or would you take, like, your PRS gun? What would you take?
Well, that's a great question. Yeah, I guess that would have to involve divulging the arsenal slightly. There's probably two ways, depending on the setup. If I had a lightweight setup where I was not expecting to find Bigfoot and I was hunting something else, if I were to spot him at a distance, and if a longer engagement distance is what I thought were to be appropriate, let's say anywhere from 100 to 300 yards, for whatever reason, I would get Bigfoot. I'd probably bring my Remington 700. I have one in 308. I typically shoot a 168 grain match bullet, sometimes 175s, and there's 180 grain Remington soft points that have been pretty accurate. That particular rifle, it's an SPS varmint. Again, not the lightest setup. It's got a big old 27-inch varmint profile barrel, but it is light enough to hike up. That's something I would probably take if I had a little bit of distance with me, and this was a lighter, like, mountain type of setup. Yeah, out to Utah, let's say. That's something I could reasonably say is that. If I had a heavier loadout and I wasn't hiking as much, and I would expect him to be a little bit closer, there's a SIG 716i. Hop can attest to that. That is a kind of a DMR/cross, heavy, high rate of fire type of rig that I've been playing with since the beginning, since I got into semi-autos. And that's probably something I would happily take Bigfoot if I needed quick follow-up shots. My 308 SIG, I think that thing would work pretty well, and they're pretty reasonably priced. And there's plenty of reviews out there. Hop's got one. Military Arms Channel has one. So I think one of those two setups, I think, would be something that I would attempt to either defend myself against Bigfoot or actually hunt for game if more logic it brought me that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are probably pretty safe choices. It's just like as everyone that watches my channel knows, like I'm a pretty big stickler for a lightweight setup. So yeah, I don't know, because right now when I'm out in the woods, I was just there this morning. I'm stuck with a 5.56. It's kind of scary to think about. Like I trust 5.56 like 100% if we're talking about human beings, but anything bigger than that, I don't know, it gets a little spooky. But
what would be a round that you would feel, let's say outside of the blackout 30-06, 308, that you would find to be an interesting one to have in the woods in like a unique setup? That'd be like, perfect for Bigfoot or perfect for some other cryptid that's Bigfoot or larger to you. That would be kind of unique. not too many restrictions withstanding.
Ooh, interesting. So, like, let's say I work for some black budget agency and I'm sent to take out a Bigfoot for eating a hike or whatever. Okay.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I don't know. So I think a lot of people are going to want to say 12 gauge.
Huh.
Here's my thing, right? Like, I want as many rounds on tap as possible. And I understand shotguns have pellets in the projectile. I get it. That is not the same as having like a 30 round mag. Like 7 rounds of buckshot with 8 pellets each is not the same as a semi-automatic rifle. Because at the end of the day, you're basically just shooting 1 round, and then that round has a sort of like circle in which it's going to be effective, but it's not as big as you think. And I don't even know, like, depending on how tough Bigfoot is, it might not even work. You might miss still. You might not even know it's there by the time you start shooting. Like, there's just so many scary factors. Maybe it's a Vor TS12. Maybe that's a good choice, but heaven forbid you have to reload it. I mean, you have 12 rounds on tap, which is great. But then if you have to reload it, you're going to take, like, half an hour to reload it. You know what I mean? I don't know, man. I think the Tavor TS12 is probably safe, as long as you have someone else there with probably just an AR of some kind. Yeah, it'd have to be a 2-man team. I wouldn't want to go by myself. That's sketchy. Yeah, I don't know. I've never thought about that. Interesting. What do you think would be the most optimal weapon for hunting an 800-pound gorilla that might be smarter than you?
Oh man, I'm with you there too. You want good capacity and you want good firepower on tap. I mean, there are a couple of solutions. Yeah, heck, actually, this is a pretty fun discussion here. Your large frame DI ARs are quite interesting. So I went to range a couple weeks ago and I found, this could be one example of something interesting. If I can get the rifle, I hope I don't have to cut or edit this part if it doesn't quite come up to my head quickly. I think the rifle is called the Reaper. This was on Military Arms channel. I keep forgetting the company's name in particular, but it's a DI system, 300 Win Mag AR. Yeah, it'd be the Reaper. I just don't know.
Oh, there you go.
It's not LWRCI. I keep forgetting what this company would be. But anyway, yeah, it's a mega large. It's like a Magnum frame AR. It's bigger than what you get for your AR-10s, SR-25s, AR-10 Gen 2s, and that it had like an 18 or 20-inch barrel. You would probably take 190 grain Remington soft point, most likely with that guy, going like 3,000 feet per second. And I believe with extended magazines, it held like 20 rounds.
Yes.
Something absolutely insane. It's a little finicky if you don't have the right factory loads. The thing would blow primers if you had some overpressure events and stuff like that. So if you have that guy with like a nice and heavy prism scope of some sort or some variable powered scope, let's say like a 1-10 or 1.8 LPVO, I think that would be a real interesting setup against Bigfoot or something real big, right? Let's say an 800-pound gorilla or 1,000-pound gorilla that was unusual. Something like that, I think, makes sense with a big old muzzle brake of some sort. Or with a big suppressor. Suppressors do reduce recoil too. Not that that's absolutely their intended purpose. Sorry, I forgot that other YouTuber's name who has a farm in Ohio who talks about recoil and suppressors. But yeah, like conceivably some kind of Magnum caliber AR. I've seen some ARs with like 338 Win Mag. There's a 4570 Magnum frame AR. Capacity's limited on that because it's a rimmed cartridge, so it'd be like this giant banana mag most likely. I have some experience with 4570. I like it a lot, but one of those I think would be like perfect for hunting. Because if there's one, sometimes there may be more, right? I know that the logic with cryptids may not check all the time, but if you're in the right forest at the wrong time, what if there's multiple, right? So I don't know.
Actually, yeah. Yeah, that's bad.
Yeah, that would be that dream. That would be that kind of dream Tremors type of setup. You probably remember that scene from Tremors where the guy like takes everything in his gun collection and throws at it. Have you seen Tremors or no?
Dude, I am a zoomer. I'm sorry.
My dude.
I've not seen
I'm going to insert this clip here when this thing uploads. You're gonna have so much fun with it. It's going into Schizo Cruise. It's gonna be literally us type of moment. No, but yeah, this guy,
it's great.
It had all sorts of really cool weapons that you probably have heard of or your grandpa's taught you about. He just like threw the kitchen sink about this. Yeah, we can call the worm there Cryptid technically. But those moments, in case there's some creatures you don't know, it's kind of a fun little fantasy LARP, I suppose. But yeah, man, I wanted to ask you what we will get to ballistics back in a sec. But what's like your next research project for cryptids coming up on the channel that you're thinking about?
Yeah, well, right now I'm doing a lot of research for this incident that happened in the Grand Canyon. So not cryptid related, but still paranormal.
Oh, sure.
So,
yeah.
Well, maybe not even paranormal, but just sort of like forbidden archaeology is just so fascinating to me. Like the idea that there's so much, like so many sites on the planet that are incredibly interesting in ways that I've never heard before. The fact that there's structures way older than the pyramids that we found that no one seems to know or care about. Like that, it's a very interesting thing to me. And I'm going to be talking about an archaeological site that allegedly happened in the Grand Canyon. This guy found an entrance to a cave. Inside, he found it was a weird civilization. He didn't quite understand what the language was. He said it was a hybrid of like Egyptian and Hindi. There was like a Buddha-like statue, this massive complex of rooms inside the cave in the wall of the Grand Canyon. And when I first heard the story, it's just way too good to be true, right? Like there's just no way a story this awesome is true. Well, what happens when you try to go where this alleged entrance was discovered? Black helicopters and planes show up immediately, and it's actually illegal to access, according to the government. And when you ask why, well, why is it illegal for me to go down this part of the Grand Canyon when it's perfectly legal for me to go everywhere else? They'll just say, oh, well, it's dangerous. It's like, okay, well, hundreds of people die in the national parks every year. Like people die all the time in the wilderness. That's an understood risk of exploring the outdoors, right? Like that's a very stupid reason. So once the government started acting like it was real, I started taking it seriously. So that's the next thing I'm covering on the channel. Pretty excited about that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned when they say certain things are real, but but when they talked about aliens, we weren't as sure. We kind of almost like, oh, they basically discredited every conspiracy theories by supposedly confirming. I guess I'm curious where I'm part of that same logic, but curious where that comes from exactly and what tempers the game theoretic about potentially what's being hidden archaeologically or in that paranormal space. Yeah, what is your take on some of that stuff? Like, what things do you believe that they confirm or deny that is congruent with what they said? Like, let's say aliens or pyramids or something like that. What do you think is? Yeah, let's rattle off a couple of things. What do you believe that the things that they confirm? What do you believe is true based on what they said?
Yeah, like how do you know if it's like when they're telling the truth and when they're lying? Is that the question?
Or examples of when they said it's true. No, I don't think it's true. I think they're lying, and maybe some logic behind it. Maybe. So we've had some of those discussions before in situ, but.
Yeah, no, there's a few underlying interesting things about that. So for a long time, and I don't think this is going to be controversial, or I don't think anyone will argue with this. When it comes to UFOs, the government didn't want people looking into it. And the reason why is because they were testing the B-2 Spirit, the F-117 Nighthawk, right, the F-22 Raptor, these war-changing weapons that continue to allow the U.S. to be the dominant force on the planet, right? like, I imagine they didn't want a ton of people out in the sky looking at those, right? So that just makes sense. So the government for a long time probably didn't want people looking into UFOs in part because of that, right? I actually have another video coming up called the Dorito UFO Project. There's a very specific UFO that's been sighted hundreds of times, and I've got a lot of pictures. I've got a big archive, and I don't think it's alien. I think it's a black budget project. It's really cool. But that being said, it's undeniable that UFOs have been sighted for centuries, for thousands of years, as far back as we can go in the human record. And so whether it's native to this planet or it's from somewhere else, there is something unexplainable. And as we understand it, right, there's something incredibly weird going on as far as there are craft that move in ways that we cannot even fathom, creating technology to move in the same way, right? Like, there are these crazy crafts, they disable our nuclear weapons, they like turn off nuclear reactors and aircraft carriers. I've heard of these things doing crazy things. And we have no defense against them. Why would the government admit that there is something out there that they cannot help their citizens with, that they cannot defend the nation against, right? Why would they admit that? Because that's weird. That's very out of character for a superpower.
I mean,
do you know why they would do that?
Oh, why? What are you thinking?
No, cool. I don't know.
Oh,
it's like,
well, you know what? I mean, if the U.S. is the greatest and most well-funded military in the world, if such a thing is true, then it should strike fear into all other world militaries, right? If it is true, and even if it's not true, it should still do the same thing. It should almost demoralize any military that is equivalent to ours or not as good, I would think. If admitting, quote unquote, because we don't, that's a superposition of whatever states of truth, right? That'd be quite interesting that they would admit, oh, hey, these things are turning off. Or again, maybe sandbagging. It's a shell game, most likely as a military strategy, right? They have every right, I think, to spread some misinformation in the military world as to the U.S. military should spread misinformation for its safety, its capability, getting the leg up. Yeah, I have no idea. I think there was, I don't know if it was on Tim Pool or Joe Rogan, there was a guy, I forgot the research, it was like alien scientist something, who had some interesting explanations of UFOs and current technology, or current capabilities.
Lazar is who you're thinking of.
I think so, yeah. Current capabilities of our current capabilities in our space programs and in our military that may resemble something that aliens might have now, or could be a prediction of how far ahead they would be or how things would move if they were that far ahead of us, which is kind of interesting. At least there was a lot of discussion on that, like in 2021, I think, which is quite interesting. And a lot of that has died quite a bit since. So I don't know. I don't think I have a good answer on what it could be. I think it's equally likely that we are alone in this universe. There's plenty of religious reasons why that could be the case. There could be rational reasons as well, just by probability. And there could be, reasons, oh, hey, we're not alone. They are around. We just don't see them. And then maybe they're far ahead. Some are more primitive. Some are less primitive. I think it's equally likely that those are true. And whatever the government is saying, it's going to be within the context of how does it stay ahead strategically against other world militaries, right? Like, Cold War being our Cold War military governments being like against Russia, for example, emergent militaries like China, other allies like India, stuff like that. So whatever it is, it's going to be tailored towards some kind of strategic or game theoretic. That's my guess. That's a long-winded answer for that, but I don't know.
Absolutely. No, that certainly could be a reason, right? It's just like scaring China and Russia, because that's really, there's no one else we're really worried about as far as I know. So there's an important strategy that it's important for everyone to understand that the intelligence community uses. The strategy is what's called the limited hangout. So limited hangout. And what it is you reveal a tiny fraction of some crazy truth to the public. And what that does, it gets the entire public fixated on that one random fact, and it keeps them from looking into other things, right? Yeah. And so it's possible that, because let's be very clear, the government didn't come out and say aliens exist. A few whistleblowers that work for the government, 3 of them, said, hey, we have reason, we believe beyond any shadow of a doubt that these crafts are real. We know the government has them. What happened was these whistleblowers were allowed to speak before Congress, right? So the government didn't say, hey, these people that work for us are right. They just allowed them to talk. And so that's an important distinction. But anyway, so there's this idea called a limited hangout. And it's important to understand that, like, this might just be a limited hangout. They might want us to focus on aliens instead of looking at other things. I don't know. It's interesting. I'm not sure what they're distracting from, though. I have no idea. It's kind of scary to think about.
Yeah, what kind of tech they're developing, no idea. It could be beyond our high school, college, and even PhD understanding of physics. That's what came up kind of in 2021. I didn't do too much research into it. I mean, I do have a physics background. I should probably just see if that's the case and confirm if, classical and quantum mechanics does comport to some of these findings. Yeah, maybe I'm going to try and do an episode on that. I don't know if it should be on this channel. I was planning to do some physics explanations, but whatever. I'll take a look at it closer. That's my laziness there. But man, it's and how that relates to cryptids. Hey, that's another thing too. Are cryptids aliens? That's another thing. Let's throw that can of worms. Are they, if aliens did exist, are cryptids manifestations of what aliens see around them in order to attempt to poorly disguise themselves? That's another thing.
Yeah, well, I certainly don't think Bigfoot's an alien. Bigfoot's way too much like a gorilla human person than an alien. People say Bigfoot's alien just to kind of skirt around the argument that, well, if Bigfoot's real, why can't we find it, right? And their explanation is it jumps through portals or whatever. I don't think Bigfoot needs to jump through portals to stay hidden. Nope. Bigfoot's certainly not an alien. Mothman, I don't know, maybe. I really struggle with the whole alien thing because, I don't know. It's just whatever other intelligence there is out in the universe or even in our own galaxy, it could just as easily have a 1,000,000-year head start on us, a 2,000,000-year head start on us. And how much of a jump is it from, faster than light travel to just traveling extra dimensionally and within dimensions and just folding space? You know what I mean? Like, if a civilization's able to reach faster than light travel, it doesn't sound like there's really anything they can't do. Mm-hmm. And so these wouldn't be it's entirely possible whoever's visiting us, they're not even from our own universe. Like, they're either local to Earth or they could just be, I don't know, from some other reality that's overlaid onto ours. But I really struggle with the whole theory that they're from other planets. Like, that to me is just, it's too easy. It's too simple of an answer. I don't know. I think it's entirely possible UFOs are native to Earth because they're seen disappearing into the ocean all the time. And the ocean's 80% unmapped. Like, we have no idea what's going on there. So I don't know. Maybe there's some crazy life form that just exists at the bottom of the Antarctic Ocean. No idea. I don't think. Yeah, go ahead.
That's definitely a fair assessment. I mean, well, I guess we'll go back. Do you believe, with all religious considerations here, do you believe there is a or do you subscribe to? And this is really the physics community. I think I could be wrong if someone. I think the physics community is split 50-50 between experimentalists and theoreticians on multiverse versus single universe. Are you more of like a multiverse believer or a single universe kind of believer?
Yeah, just from, what and like, I watch physics YouTube videos. That's the extent of my physics understanding. But from what I understand from like things like the double split experiment or the double slit experiment, you know what I'm talking about,
Yeah, of
right?
course, yeah.
Where like the whole observer thing, that frick, that's scary. Anyway, um, that's so frightening, dude. From what I understand, it seems entirely likely that there are other universes, obviously. But the thing is they're not like to the left or right of our universe because there's no space outside of space. So if they exist, they're overlaid onto our reality. That's the only way it could work. They can't be like distant. They have to be right here. Does that make sense? Because like the universe is always depicted as a giant expanding bubble. Well, if there's another universe, if there's a split dimension, it's not going to be somewhere else. It's going to be right here. And I don't know. In religious language, we would call it a veil. There's a separation between those realities from those universes. And I don't know. There's some indication from what Bob Lazar said, from what people at Skinwalker Ranch have said, from some scriptures in the Bible. It seems like things can slip occasionally using an incredible amount of energy between those two worlds. So I don't know. It's possible that's where like Dogman comes from. There's no evolutionary precedent for Dogman. I'm very confident it exists. That'd be a great explanation for that. I don't know. Yeah, I guess multidimensional. That was a really long answer to a really simple question.
No, that's so. I like this. This is another way of seeing, because the split I've had in my education has been, hey, there are multiverses left or right of us, or up and down, so to speak, and you travel interdimensionally through wormholes, black holes, that kind of thing. This superimposed veiled universe that is within our Cartesian and Euclidean geometry, being like right here with us, but it's occasionally unveiled through application of energy from one dimension to another, is that seems like a more total explanation for layered universes that are existing immediately between each other, and these strange occurrences of creatures disappearing into seemingly nothingness, but our physics explains, again, the big expansion or the Big Bang, right? So that seems to be good, a unifying theory for some of these explanations. I kind of like that. I'd be curious to see a video from you on which of these creatures exist within our plane. Yeah, we'll call them planes. I'd have to geometrically call them something different. But within our plane, they're not traveling between or through the veil, so to speak, or through the mosquito curtain that we call this fabric, and ones that travel quite freely between them, and we're only spotting them sometimes because we only caught them traveling temporarily. And I'm really curious how that's which ones you think might be doing that. I know there's a lot of questions. I'm really poking you on this one, but you have really good research and explanations on this stuff, and that's why I'm kind of doing that.
Yeah, man. Yeah, there's certainly quite a few. Like the Flatwoods Monster, that's another good one that sounds not from here. Because even though, obviously I'm deeply religious, but I use evolution as kind of my platform to look and analyze cryptids. Like Bigfoot is one of the most sound creatures I could possibly fathom. Like it just, Bigfoot makes so much sense the more I learn about it in terms of the way it acts, its behavior, especially as you study primates, as you study primates, your appreciation for the Sasquatch story makes sense. So yeah, evolution's kind of the lens that I judge everything by. So when I hear Dogman, it's like, well, frick, that's quite the jump from wolf to bipedal hominid with a dog head. You know what I mean? I don't know. It doesn't sound from here. It sounds like it's from somewhere else. So,
well, reconciling evolution with theology, that's probably going to be another separate episode for sure. And I'd like to do that one with you for sure. Seeing what I know now a little bit within context. So that'll be kind of fun. And then trying to tie that in with cryptids would be pretty neat too. I think we're both kind of running out on time here, unfortunately, though. Where can my viewers find your content, man?
Yeah, so just go to YouTube, type in SchizoSaint. It's not a great YouTube channel name, but I love it. If you want to hear me rant about gear, guns, cryptids, all that wonderful stuff that's going to get me one day, feel free to look me up. And yeah.
No problem, man. Hey, this has been a real pleasure, and there's going to be a lot more episodes. I can tell that we've opened so many cans of worms that we need to start to pick up the pieces and sort them, man. So, yeah, thanks for coming back on. I hope to do this a little bit more, and I will see you guys on the range.